Now on the show, we're joined by the founder of Contact Light, Mike Boyd. He is an app expert, and he's somebody that we go to every single time we want to talk about the latest and greatest apps, but also how apps are working, the app ecosystem. He joins us today. Welcome, Mike.
Morning, Charlie. How are you?
Really well. I want to talk to you about the COVIDSafe app because there's a lot of discussion going around at the moment about this one because people still seem to think, even with the millions of apps installed on smartphones across Australia, that the government is using this as some kind of a ploy to become even more connected to us than we would somewhat be comfortable with, even comments from politicians who we won't name. First question that I've seen floating around, is it possible for the government to update the app, for example, via an update at some time in the future, to all of a sudden add in all these new features that we were not accepting or wanting in the first place?
Yes, the government can certainly update the app and add location tracking or location services to any update that they do in the future. The really key thing to this is that they cannot enable that feature without our express permission. So they can certainly put those features into the app, but it will still be up to us as individuals to accept or deny that feature to be enabled on the app when we have it running.
So there's also this question of, I got asked the other day on Twitter, if the app is that good and this idea of the app is so good, why aren't other countries doing it? I know Singapore did it. Is this app actually developed by us, or did we license or borrow the source code, for example, from somewhere else? Where did it all come from?
So yes, the Singaporean government and their Ministry of Health were very, very pioneering and very early to sort of develop this idea of tracing via two mobile devices and using Bluetooth to connect between the two devices. The Australian app COVIDSafe was developed here domestically there was a consortium of companies that have been working for the last couple of weeks to build the app. However, the app here in Australia is built on the Singaporean code base. I haven't seen the official release of that code base, but I've certainly seen some snippets from the Android app that clearly indicate that there are traces of the Singaporean source code in the app as we know it today.
The interesting thing as well that's being asked is why pick a version of Android especially, but iOS too. iOS is version 10, Android is version 6. Why pick a version that close or even that far and not allow apps to run on systems or phones that run those systems that are older than that? Why do app developers pick a software version and say beyond that, more installation of the app?
Look. The easiest analogy I can draw is it's like trying to fit a larger engine to a car. At some point, if you want the extra horsepower in the car, you're going to have to update the chassis, the wheels, the gearbox, and the brakes, and so forth. And it's exactly the same with our devices. As the hardware becomes more sophisticated, then the software, the operating systems, and also the apps that we build also need to kind of grow with that capability. And as a result, you then tend to have a breaking point that says anything backwards of that particular point. So as you say, Android 6 and iOS 10 in the case of COVIDSafe, that's the backwards compatibility blocking point, if you like. Now, the flip side of that is that more than 3/4 of every Apple device, iPad and iPhone here in Australia is running the latest version of iOS, so 13.3, I think it is. On Android, I think 2/3 of devices are running the latest or the second to latest generation of the software. So it's the point about that backwards compatibility really is what we would call an edge case. It's for the smaller percentages of the marketplace that might be those versions of those devices running on those versions of software that might be running on hardware that might not be as sophisticated as the latest and greatest.
It is interesting though as well though, because you look at some smartphones. I got one. This is the Jimmy Connect. This is our smartphone. It's running Android Go,
yep.
And it's running the app completely comfortably. Like I've had it on for about 24 hours, and when you go in and look at the battery the results of the battery consumption. We've used, well, this device has used about 22 days of the app. Actually, it's not a lot of battery power that the app is using on some devices, but I'm hearing on other devices it's more.
Well, again, it comes down to the level of resources that are built into the hardware itself. The COVIDSafe app really doesn't do a lot of things. As I said, it's not accessing your GPS antenna. It's not accessing the mobile data antenna. It's only accessing the Bluetooth capabilities in the phone, and then obviously just doing that pinging, if you like, or that recording of other devices running the same app that come into range. So Bluetooth connectivity actually isn't as big a drain on battery as it used to be. Bluetooth, like all bits of hardware, has evolved, and as a result, if you've got a piece of hardware that's got a good Bluetooth antenna on it, it will be a lot more efficient today with its battery consumption than it would have been 2 or 3 years ago.
Quick question to finish off. Google and Apple obviously are doing some work with their operating systems. How will that affect the COVIDSafe app that we have on our phones today, if at all?
Look, it really will depend on what the government chooses to do in terms of how they adopt and enhance the app as it goes forward. The Apple Google solution is twofold. Remember, the first will be, which we expect to be in the next week or two, will be a set of APIs, so tools and systems that developers can use to do COVID tracing in a slightly different way to what COVIDSafe does. And I think that's going to be a very, very good thing, because we then get to the point where we'll be able to build COVID-19 tracing into other third-party apps, which is a whole other discussion, but I think it's really important. The second part of the Apple Google solution is that, come updates to iOS, which the next version of iOS is typically due in sort of September, COVID tracing will be built into the actual operating system itself. So rather than it being a distinct application running on your piece of hardware, it will be built into the operating system. And again, there will be permissions to turn it on, turn it off, and whatever ways that Apple and Google build it into their operating systems will shift it from being this, shift the COVID tracing from being something that we have to enable and download to it just being built into the operating system. And as a result, the adoption of that will go from probably in the low double digits to north of 50% in a very, very short space of time.
Fantastic. Just got to build it in the operating system, then everyone's going to accept it without thinking about it. Mike Boyd, founder of Contact Light, thank you for joining us today, mate. Good to have a chat about these apps. We'll speak to you again soon to get more details about the app world that we all engage with on our smartphones.